If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that Tailwind CSS is my favorite design framework. Well, in today's video, we're going to be covering Flowbite, which is an extension of Tailwind CSS. It allows us to quickly build UI components within a view, and we can spend much less time worrying about sort of the CSS rules and design that we'll put in to an application. So in today's video, we're just going to be building out several different UI components using Flowbite as our library. Now, with that being said, let's start building. Alright, so before we jump in, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and the bell icon to stay notified on future videos as I release them. Alright, so right now I'm on the flowbite-react.com website. That's flowbite-react.com. And essentially what this is a package specifically made for React and Next.js, which allows us to easily work with Flowbite's components. Now, if you guys are interested in actually seeing Flowbite's documentation in itself, you can go to flowbite.com and it'll bring you to a separate documentation area because Flowbite can support many different languages and frameworks. You know, it can support vanilla JavaScript and vanilla TypeScript, as well as other front-end frameworks. So if you're, working with a different framework or language, you might want to go to flowbite.com instead. But because this crash course is going to be covering React and Next.js, we're going to be working directly with the package known as Flowbite-React. So if I click on docs above, it'll take me to a whole new documentation area that's specific for Flowbite React. And as you can see here, we have various new links here on the side, and they added documentation to support Next.js. So we're going to be installing this using Next.js 14 today. But essentially it can also work with earlier versions of Next.js and React as well. Now on the very left sidebar, there's an area called components. If I expand that, you guys can see we have various components available to us. We have Accordion, we have alert, we have buttons, we have different components available to us. And we're going to be just going through these one by one. And let me just give you a preliminary review of what we're going to be building today. Essentially, we're not going to be building an actual website. We're only going to be going through these components one by one. So as we go through this, we'll be writing this out using Next.js, specifically JSX, so you guys can see how these things render to the view, how these components specifically render to the view. So that's what we're going to be building today. Without further ado, let's jump straight into Visual Studio Code and start building. So the first thing I generally like to do is create a brand new folder on my local device. So right now I'm on a Mac, and to create a brand new folder within the command prompt, I type mkdir, and I'm going to call this folder flowbite-crash. Now, if you're on a Windows, it'll be something similar to this, or you can just manually do it by going to the directory in which you'd like to create the folder, right-click, and just create a brand new folder and name it flowbite-crash or whatever you would like to name it. Next, I'm just going to change the directory, so I'm going to do cd. I'm going to go into the flowbite-crash folder, hit enter, and now I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code by typing code space dot and hit enter. So now I have a specific folder allocated to this project. So I'm just going to expand this folder. And so far we have no contents within this folder, as you know, because we just created it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new Next.js project within this folder, and then we're going to add all of our dependencies as we need. So let me just flip back. I'm going to be flipping back between various views. What I want to do is I want to go back to my browser view, which is, where is it? Right here. Now, we have some instructions on the Flowbite-React website that we can use to install this for Next.js, but I'm not going to follow this method because Next.js comes prepackaged with Tailwind CSS, so I don't necessarily need to install Tailwind CSS as a dev dependency separately. I can actually have it built in within my installation, or my creation rather. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So going back to Visual Studio Code, the first thing I'm going to do is open up my integrated terminal by by coming up top, clicking terminal. And again, I'm on a Mac, so on a Windows, it might say command prompt, or you might just want to look up online how to do this. But if I click terminal and new terminal, it opens up my integrated terminal. So now what I want to do is create a brand new Next.js project, and I can do that by running an npx command. Now, before I do that, as I had mentioned in my other videos on my channel, you need to make sure you have Node.js installed. So make sure you have the newest version of Node.js. For example, if I write node here, dash version, it'll show me that I'm currently on version 21.1.0. So you want to make sure that you have Node.js installed, because if you ran this command, it would actually show that it's an invalid command, right? So once you install Node.js, you should be able to get access to npm and npx as well. I'll put a link in the video description below to Node.js's installation path. So just make sure you click that link, and then you can directly download the file and get it installed onto your local machine. So first, what I'm going to do here, let me just clear my terminal. I'm going to create a brand new Next.js project by typing npx create -next-app @ and we want the latest version of Next.js space. And because I want this to be created in my current directory, I'm going to type a dot or a period and hit enter. And that's going to automatically create this Next.js project within my current directory. So now we're going to have to go through a wizard essentially of various questions of things that is asking us to install. So we're not actually, you know what, we're going to use TypeScript for this installation here. And the reason why is because Flowbite directly supports TypeScript. Now we're not going to be worried about how to create types or the specifics of TypeScript, but I'm just going to set this up just so that way we can make sure everything works perfectly. Now I do know from history, from working with this before, that it does work with vanilla JavaScript as well. But just for the sakes of this tutorial, we're just going to be using TypeScript. So let's make sure we select TypeScript here by selecting yes and hit enter. And then everything else can be the default. So we're just going to hit enter through everything else. And that's going to create our Next.js project. So for this particular tutorial, I won't go through the specifics of what this project comprises of. In my other crash courses, I actually go into the nitty-gritty of what every folder and file does, so you might want to look at those videos. But the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a brand new components folder within our app folder. Now, just on a very high level, our app folder is the folder that is where most of our components and our code will be kept. And we would be working out of this app folder to build any kind of supporting code or UI components we would like to add within our project. So I'm just going to highlight app here, and I'm going to create a new folder by clicking this icon, and I'm going to call this folder components and hit enter. Because what we're going to have in here, we're going to have a header and a footer. So let's go ahead and set up those files right now. Now, the quickest way that I set up components here is I have an extension installed in my Visual Studio Code called ES7 plus React plus Redux. So you can look this up online. You can look up ES7 plus React plus Redux, R-E-D-U-X, on Google, and it should give you the website to Visual Studio's extensions marketplace. So when you install that extension in your Visual Studio Code, it will allow you to quickly create React components or Next.js components. And let me show you exactly how this works right now. So the very first component I'm going to create is a header. So I'm going to highlight this new components directory we just created and click this file icon, and I'm going to call this app header with a capital A for app and a capital H for header, and we're going to say .tsx because we're working with TypeScript. And let's hit enter, and that's going to create a brand new TypeScript file for us. So now this extension works like this. If I type RAFCE and hit enter, it's going to create a brand new app header component for us. This is essentially a React functional component that we can use to build out our view. So now I'm just going to hit escape a couple of times just to escape the highlighted area. And what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just going to put some empty React fragment brackets right here. So yeah, I'll just leave that as this. We just want to set up the scaffold for our components for now. Then we'll come back later and actually populate it with some markup. So now just to quickly explain, if you're new to Next.js or React, we have this return statement here, and then we have these set of parentheses here. Anything within these parentheses is essentially called JSX, and JSX is pretty much HTML or markup code that we write within the return statement, which gets returned to our view, right? So anything that we'll have here, like buttons, links, anything that a component or a view should render would go within these parentheses here. So you'll see once I come back to this, when we populate this, how this works. So once again, I'm going to go and click on components just to highlight it, and I'm going to create another file here, and I'm going to call this one app with a capital A, and then footer with a capital F, and then .tsx. So I want to create an app footer.tsx file. I'll hit enter, and then once again RAFCE, can't type today, sorry, RAFCE will create the app footer component here. And let's go ahead and get rid of this and put some empty React brackets here. So yeah, these are essentially our first two components, and what we're going to do is in our layout file, we'll go and we'll reference these two components. So let's go ahead and close up, or let's collapse this new components folder. We don't need it for now. And now let's look at some of our other files within the app folder. So the very first one I'll look at here is the globals.css file. Now in this file at the very top, we have our Tailwind directives that were automatically added to this file when we essentially installed Tailwind CSS as part of our new Next.js project. So what I'm going to do, starting from line number 5, I'm going to get rid of all of this CSS code like that, and let's just make sure that we save by doing Command S or Control S on a Windows, I believe, or you could just manually save it by going to File and Save. And so yeah, we got rid of all the styling that comes as part of the default Next.js setup. Now let's go to our next file, which is layout.tsx. And in this file here, we just to kind of go through this is essentially the outer shell, excuse me, of our application. So in this file, we have references to Google Fonts. We have references to our global.css file, which we just edited just now. And then we have some metadata information. This metadata information is used by Google to rank our application. If we're working with SEO and we're trying to optimize our application, we would essentially edit this metadata for this particular page. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Let me get rid of the current title, and I'm just going to give it a new title of Flowbite React, like that. And then I'm going to get rid of this current description and say Flowbite React Crash Course. So essentially this will be the title and description of our Google search engine placement, if you will. Right, so anytime you want to edit your for SEO purposes, you would come and you would add a metadata object if it doesn't already exist in your file, and then you would define your title, description, and I believe you can also add keywords to that object as well. But let's go down further here. And so the main part of this file is this root layout component, and this kind of closely resembles the other components we just saw, which were app header and app footer, but essentially this is a React component, and in here we're passing in a children prop, and this children prop will allow us to directly get access to the underlying components. So for example, if we're currently on the home page, the children would be the actual home page component, and we're passing that into this layout, and essentially within this layout we would be rendering that home page within the body of the HTML. But what I want to do for now is I want to edit this file a bit, so that way we'll be able to add additional styling to it. So let's see what we want to do here. The first thing I guess I'll do here is I'll go ahead and I'll cut this children component or this children prop out. So all we have here is just a body, an empty body. And if I hit enter, that'll open up the set of brackets. And I'm just going to add here a main HTML tag, and I'll hit enter on that, and then I'll paste in the children. And basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding a main component to this, so that way we can add a container around it, because we just want to style things a little bit better here, so that way it just looks better on the page. All right, so the next thing I'll do here is we'll use a little bit of Tailwind CSS. I'm going to add a class name attribute on this. That's the same as adding like class in HTML. We just call it class name in React and Next.js projects. And let's just add a class name of container here. And let's give it a padding top. Let's see. Let's give it a padding top of 10 just to add a little bit of space on top. And let's give it a padding bottom of 40, quite a bit, so that way we'll have enough white space below. And then finally, let's add a minimum height of screen length. Okay, so that's going to give us a height of the screen on the bare minimum, so that way we'll see all of the components without the need of having to scroll down. And I think that pretty much will do it for now. Actually, you know what we'll do? Let's go ahead and also reference our brand new header and footer within this layout. And basically what that's going to do is, let's imagine a scenario where we continue to add new pages or new components. That means essentially that the header and footer would render on every single page that we add in the future. So we don't necessarily have to add the header and the footer to every page in itself. We can reduce our code by just adding it to the to this layout file, and then essentially it would render on every single page. So let's do that. Right under the HTML tag, but above the body tag, I'm going to add my header. So I'm going to type in here app header, like that. Now, if you notice, we have an error message, and the reason why we have this error message is because we need to bring this in. We need to actually import this reference directly into this file. So before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead down here, and then after this closing body tag, I'll add my footer as well, like that. And then at the very top of this file, I'm going to bring in my header and footer. So let's say here, I'll say import app header, like this. And it's auto-suggesting the actual path. So if I hit enter, you'll see that this is coming from the components folder. So if that did not auto-import for you, all you would just do is type this out here, import app header from, and then you can use a set of single quotes or double quotes to your liking, /component/app header, and that should work. And let's also bring in our footer like this, hit enter, and there we have our footer. So now if I go back down here, you'll notice that the red squiggly line goes away because it's able to find our components that's within our application. So this file is all done. Let's go ahead and close this out. So the next thing we'll do here is let's run this application just to see what this looks like. So I'm going to go back down here to my terminal. Let's clear this out. And I'm going to run a command called npm run dev. Now, if you guys recall, as I mentioned, you need to make sure you have Node.js installed for this command to work as well. So if I hit enter, it's going to run this this code, the bundler, and now it says ready. So now if I flip back to my browser, to see this app in action, I need to go to localhost :3000. So localhost port 3000, like this, hit enter. And we have here our Next.js application. So right now it looks rather ugly. What we need to do is edit this home page, because essentially what we're rendering right now is the home page. So let's flip back to our Visual Studio Code. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my next file, which is the page.tsx file, which is right below layout.tsx. It's still in the app folder. Now, this is the code that's currently rendering on the page. We can safely get rid of this. Let's highlight everything and just hit delete or backspace, and that will get rid of everything. And let's use our RAFCE command and hit enter to create a brand new component. And now I'm going to name this component home page. let's make sure that on lines number 3 and 9 is named as home page, because essentially what we're doing is we're creating a functional component variable on line number 3, and on line number 9 we are returning this or exporting this component to the rest of the application. So we need to make sure that those names match. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's get rid of that, and let's just add some empty brackets. So now if I go back, you'll notice that there's nothing on the page, and that automatically reloaded because Next.js comes with hot reloading capability, so we don't have to manually refresh anything. Now I will say on occasion you may have to manually refresh, especially if something like an error message is thrown or something else happens unexpectedly within your application. So in that case, you can just go ahead and just manually refresh. But in this case, we didn't have to do that because of hot reloading. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. So I think the next thing what we're going to do is let's go ahead and install our Flowbite and Flowbite React packages. So instead of killing this server here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a brand new tab by clicking this plus icon right here in Visual Studio Code, which is next to this node selector. So let's click the tab. That's going to open up a brand new command line or terminal. And in here, I'm going to type npm install Flowbite space Flowbite -react. And that's going to install two packages, the Flowbite base package as well as the Flowbite React package. So let's give that a while here. And now, while that's installing, we need to configure a few things once that's done installing. We're going to have to configure our Tailwind CSS file as well as our other configuration files to make this work. So let's give that a second to install. All right, so now that that's done installing, there is one more package we need to install, and we'll just go ahead and install it now. But essentially, I want to install the React icons package because we're going to be using various icons within our application just to make things look a lot nicer. So let's go ahead and type npm, and this time we'll use the I command, which also means install. So you can either do npm install or npm I, and then it's going to be react-icons. Let's hit enter. And that was much quicker, so because it's a smaller package essentially. So that installed React icons in our project. So let's clear our terminal now. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to configure this new package that we installed, Flowbite package. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my tailwind.config.ts file. So let's open that up here. That's in the root directory. And there's a few things we'll need to change here. Now, I've noticed while toying around with this is that the documentation, for me, it didn't fully work. And what I'm specifically talking about here is the content object that we have up top here. So this content object takes in several references to various components that we'll need to reference to make this work within our application. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to just get rid of this part here, all of this, to make just to empty that out. And I want you guys to look at my GitHub repo link in the description below, because it's going to have a reference to all of these components. And this should work for your Next.js 14 project. So let me just copy out these references here. And 1 second. Let's copy this out here like this, quite a bit. And let's paste it in here like this. So just make sure that you have this work looking like this, because for some reason it wasn't working for me otherwise. But basically what this is it has a reference to the various components within the app folder, pages folder if you're using Next.js 12 and earlier, as well as the components folder and the node modules folder. So just make sure that you have these references within your content object, and that should work just fine. And then the last thing we want to edit here is we have this plugins array below. So let's open that up. And essentially what we want to add here is a require statement to require the plugin that we just installed. So let me just copy that out. And this part comes from the documentation, guys. So let me just paste that in here. So we have require, and then we have a opening and closing parentheses, and we're just passing in a string of flowbite / plugin. And that should be it for this file. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here to my integrated terminal, and I'll just do a Control-C to stop the server, and I'll clear this out. I'm going to just run server again by using npm run dev. The reason why I did that is because I made an edit to my tailwind.config file. So essentially, whenever you make an edit to that file, it's a good practice to just restart your server. So I think we're done with that file now as well. I'm just going to close out all these tabs so we don't make any mistakes. Okay, so it's asking me to make a save to app header. I think that's fine the way it is. All right, cool. So now the next thing that we want to do is let's get started with building out our home page. Let's open up our page TSX file. We're still working within the app folder, and that's essentially what we're going to be working out of today for the most part of this tutorial. So now within this component here, how we're gonna approach this is, as you saw on the demo at the start of this video, we're not going to be building a web page with this. Leave a comment below if you'd like to see that in action. If I see enough comments in the section below and enough likes on this video, I'll definitely create a brand new tutorial on how to use Flowbite to build an actual website. But what we're going to do is we're just going to be going through component by component, and this video will take quite a bit of time because I want to get as detailed as possible on how to use Flowbite within our application. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing today. So let's get started by doing a few things here. So first, I'm going to, within this component, I'm going to define some variables. And these variables will hold values that we'll use several times within the application. So the first one is going to be a logo. So I'm going to type here const logo and hit enter. And let's just close that out with a set of empty, or rather an empty string, a set of single braces. Now I'm going to use the Codeversity logo here because we're just going to be using images or image-based components to show the sheer power of Flowbite. So let me just grab here the URL to the Codeversity image, and we'll just paste it here. And you can use any image you want for this tutorial. You don't have to use my logo. You can use any image you want. All right, so this is the URL to the Codeversity logo. Next, what I'm going to do is we're going to be using a state. When we work with modals, we're going to be using a state for opening and closing the modals. So I'll go ahead and I'll define that right now. So I'm going to say const set of square brackets, and I'm going to call this open. Let's call this open modal. I say set open modal, and that's going to be equal to useState. And we're going to just pass false as a default. So this is essentially state management within React, and this is a way that we can track the value of our variable within our application. As things happen within our application, we need to be able to react to those changes, hence the name React. So we're going to be using this state variable, this state management construct to track the changes of the open modal, whether it's open or closed. So up top here, because we're using this useState directive, what we need to do is we just need to import that from the React package. So I'm going to replace this import React with a set of curly braces, and we're going to destruct the useState property like this, or the useState hook to be specific from React. Okay, so that's essentially all we're going to be doing with the variable part of this. Everything else will be essentially markup. So right now here we have a set of empty brackets. I'm just going to open that up here. And let's start building. So let me just show you guys what I'm doing here. So if I were to render this again, I think the server is already running. If I go back to our browser, you'll see we have nothing. Let me just do a hard refresh here. So now we have an error message, as you can see here. It looks like it's having an issue with the use state hook that we're trying to import. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Okay, and in here at the top, we're using use state. Now, state management in React is, especially in the case of Next.js 13 and 14, it is respective to client components. So if you look at my Pokemon API video, you'll notice that I've highlighted the differences between client components and server components. So check that video out after this one. But essentially in Next.js 13 and higher, we have the concept of client and server components. In fact, we had it in earlier versions of Next.js, but now it's been made a lot simpler. But in this case, because we're bringing in the use state hook from React, we should treat this particular functional component as a client component because it's the client side of our application that would be rendering and handling essentially the workload for this application, for this particular component. So what I'm going to do here is on line number 1, I'm just going to make a brand new line. And up here, I'm going to type in single quotes and use client as our directive, and I'll save that. So now if I go back to the browser, it's going to auto refresh for us. And now you see that the error message is gone. So that's essentially how we'll handle that particular scenario. All right, so with that being said, let's move on here. So what we want to do, if I head back to Visual Studio, is let's start building out some of our components that we need to work with here. So let's see, what I'm going to do, the approach that I'm going to take is I'm going to build out one component at a time from our library. So for instance, if I flip back, let's flip back to the documentation here. I think I closed the tab. Let's just reopen it. We want to go again to flowbite-react.com. And here, what we want to do is go to docs, because what we want to ultimately look at is a list of the components that we can leverage here. So if I expand components, you'll see that we have several. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Accordion, okay? So we're going to figure out how can we build this accordion using some of this this documentation, and essentially this is rather easy. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a div within our our empty brackets here. So let me just open this up here. And on line number 11, I'm going to add a div, and we'll close that out. And that div will have a class name, like that, exactly. And so we're going to give this a class name of component. And I just want to double check something. If I do Command P and I go to my globals.css file, we still need to populate this file here. So I guess let's go ahead and do the CSS before we jump into the components, just to make sure we have our styling here intact. So essentially this file is not going to have much styling. What we're going to do is we're going to create some style for the component. So down here on line number 5, I'll type a selector, class selector for component, because this is going to be essentially our container for every single component we'll add to the page. And we're going to use some Tailwind CSS here. So I'm going to use the @apply directive or annotation here. And then I'm going to give this component a margin bottom of level 6. If you guys want to know exactly what that means, like level 6 versus 2 versus 10, you can look at the Tailwind documentation. It's going to give you line by line what each and every one does, what each level means, and how many pixels or rims it represents. All right, so let's now get to our footer. And for our footer, we're going to add the @apply again. And let's give this footer a background color. And I'm going to explain to you why I'm putting an exclamation mark here at the very beginning. But we're going to give this a background of blue, and let's make it rather dark. So we'll give it an intensity of 800. Okay. Now, you may be asking, well, why are you adding this exclamation mark prior to the background? The reason why is that when you're working with Flowbite React components, sometimes the style does not get overridden for particular elements. So for example, for the footer, I've noticed that if I were to remove this exclamation mark, the footer would remain as white, a white background, or sort of like a light gray background by default. But so sometimes I have to add the exclamation mark, which represents important. For example, if you guys are familiar with CSS, the exclamation mark important is used to override certain styles. Obviously, it's not the most recommended thing to do, but in the case of working with some Flowbite components, it's just much quicker to use this exclamation mark. Now, the preferred way of doing that generally is creating a theme from Flowbite, but that's a little bit too much out of the scope of this tutorial. I want to keep things rather simple. So if you guys are interested in knowing more about that, you can definitely look at the documentation. All right, so the next thing I want to do is within the footer, we're going to have several links and various types of elements. So I'm going to use this footer selector with a star because I want to impact all, or style rather, every single component within footer. So I'm going to use the @apply annotation again, and let's do the exclamation mark, and we're going to say text white. We're going to have a couple of classes here. We're going to give it a font of bold, and then let's give it some letter spacing. So we'll use tracking -wide here, and I'll save that. And I think that'll do it for our globals.css file. That's all we essentially need. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to come back to this page here. So let's see. Actually, there's some more styling I would like to add. Let's open up globals.css one more time. Let's go back to globals.css. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to clean this up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create what is known as a layer, and a layer in Tailwind CSS is essentially a grouping of various styles based on what type of element is being impacted. So for example, if I did an @layer and base, this base keyword is basically coming from up here on line number 1. So this is essentially all of the base elements of HTML, like H1s, paragraph tags, anchor tags, and so on. You would essentially put your styling for all of these tags within this base element. So what I want to do is I want to actually style some of the headings and some other styles within this base element. So we're going to first start with our H1 tag. So let's just type H1 with some opening and closing curly braces. And I'm going to do apply again. And this time on this, I'm going to do text 2XL. Because we just want to make it somewhat large. We're going to do font bold. And let's see. Let's add some padding on the top and bottom of this. So we'll do PY-4. That gives it a moderate amount of padding. Not too much, not too little. Okay, so that's it for that one. And if you notice, we did not add the exclamation mark there because we didn't need it in this case, because non-package components work pretty well without the exclamation mark. There's no need to override or use important on these classes. So now let's style our H2, and our H2 will also use apply again, and we're going to just do font semi-bold on this one, okay? Because we don't want it to be very, very dark bold. We just want a little bit of bolding or boldness on it. Now we're going to style our nav bar, right? Because again, we're going to have a nav bar, which is part of our header. So up here, we're going to do @apply, and let's actually make this nav bar. We're going to use the exclamation mark because this is essentially going to be a Flowbite component, this nav. So we're going to use the exclamation mark here. And again, I guess the best approach, guys, for you to know whether you should use the exclamation mark or not is try it without the exclamation mark first. And if it doesn't work for some reason, use the exclamation mark, okay? So we're just going to do exclamation mark BG-blue-800. That's essentially the same color as our footer. And within this nav, similar to what we did with the footer, we're just going to do a nav star to impact the inner elements. And we're going to use apply again. And we're going to do another exclamation mark. And we're going to say text white because we want the text to be white. We're going to put some small padding on the top and bottom by using the y-axis. That's why we're saying PY. If we wanted to impact the horizontal axis or the x-axis, we would do PX. But in this case, we're doing PY because we want padding on the top and bottom of this element. Then next, we're going to do text base because we want to use the base font, which I believe is 1 rem or 16 pixels. So we're just going to use just enforce the base size of this font. And if lastly, we're going to put some letter spacing, and we're going to do tracking wide. And what that means is we're basically giving it a little bit of letter spacing. I believe it's about 1 pixel, 1 to 1.5 pixels of letter spacing between. So working with Tailwind CSS, my focus is not necessarily to care about how many pixels specifically everything is, because I'm not a designer. My focus is just making sure things look good on the page. So if things look pretty good on a page, I'm content with that. All right, so let's see, what do we want to do next? So this code that's below, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create another layer. So right underneath this layer, after we close it out on line 21, let's add another layer, and this one is going to be components. Let's just add our curly braces, and this components again is referencing above line number 2. So what we're going to do here is we've created these custom classes. I'm just going to highlight all of these all the way to the bottom, cut them out, and I'm going to put them within this layer just to keep things nice and orderly here. So let's just make sure our indentation looks good. I think it's fine. We can fix it along the way. Okay, so now we have our component in here. What I want to do before we check everything else here is I want to add some styling for the container, because by default Tailwind CSS gives us some padding or some PX on the left and right, within the container. But essentially what I want to do is I want to just add a margin left and right auto so that the container will always be centered to the page. So I'm just going to say here container, and this is essentially not going to wipe away the default styles that come with Tailwind. Essentially, it's just going to add this additional utility class styling to the container class. So we're just going to say apply mx-auto, and that should center the container. All right, so I'm just trying to think if we're going to use any other classes here. So we got footer. I think that's it. That's all we want here. So now that that's been cleaned up, now I can finally close this file here. And let's go back to our page. Now, essentially what we're going to do here is in every single component on our page, we're going to have an H1 heading that's going to represent the specific section or component we're working with. And then we're going to render out the component and its usage to give examples. So the first one I'm going to work with here is Accordion. So I'm going to type here H1 Accordion. And guys, if you've noticed my tag auto close, I have an extension for that called auto close tag, which is a Visual Studio Code extension. You can install that. Otherwise, you could just type out the closing tag after the opening tag. It just may take a little bit more time. All right, so we have Accordion here. Now, the way that we use Accordion is essentially we'll have to bring it in from the Flowbite React package. Now, this automatically happens if I type here an opening bracket, Accordion, and then I get the auto suggest from Flowbite. But what we want is we want the Flowbite React version of this, not the Flowbite version. The difference between the two is that Flowbite is essentially, it could be used for any single framework. And it's going to give you an accordion, but it's going to look a little bit different than the accordion I'd like to use. The Flowbite React version of the accordion is optimized to be used with React or Next.js. So I'm going to use this one here and bring that in. And I'm just going to close that and open this up. All right. So if I look up top here, what automatically happened is we have this accordion being brought in from Flowbite React up top. This is exactly what we want here. Now, what I'm going to do is, because over time as we populate this file, we're going to be auto adding or auto importing these references. Every time I type the code, it's going to auto import and destruct within these curly braces. So just to make things easy to read, I'm just going to make a new line here like this. So you don't have to do this, but I like to do this so that way it's easier for me to read these imports as they're being brought in, whether I manually bring them in myself or it gets auto imported when I type it out. All right, so good. That's just for legibility. All right, so what I want to do here is I'm going to define a few of these subcomponents within Accordion. So the very first thing I'll do here is I'm going to bring in the accordion panel like this, accordion.panel. All right. And that's just pretty much going to, it's sort of like a card, if you will, for the accordion. It's just going to bring in the proper boxing for this accordion. The next thing I'll add here is I'm going to add an accordion title. So accordion.title. Okay. Now for the accordion title, I'm just going to call this item 1, because what we're going to just do is just kind of output a couple of items. We're not going to have any actual information in there. All right, so now the content comes next. So right within this same panel, the way this works is essentially you're going to have, like, if you know how an accordion looks, when you click on a particular row of an accordion, first in the row you have the heading, which will be represented by item 1, the title here. And then when you click on the row, it's going to expand or drop down, and then there will be content within the accordion's row. So this is what this content does. So accordion dot content will be our actual text that will be rendered when we click on a particular row within the accordion. So in here, we're just going to have a paragraph. We'll close that out. And let's give this paragraph some styling. I'm not sure why my auto import is not working for this. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to give this a class name. We're going to give it some margin bottom, some very small margin bottom, just to give us a little bit of spacing there. And let's open that up. And we're just going to say this is the text for item 1, like that. All right, so that I'll just save that by hitting Command S or Control S on a Windows machine. And you know what I'm going to do just to kind of save time with this? I'm just going to copy these panels. So let's go down here to panel, and I'm just going to copy everything to the opening tag and hit make some new space and paste it in 2 more times like that. Okay, so what we want to do now up here, let's just look at this. Okay, so this is item 1. We're going to go to item 2 now. So down here on the second one, we're going to just change this to item 2. Actually, this one should be item 3. So let's just change that really quickly while we're here. This is item 3, and then the one right above will be item 2, right? So item 2, item 2. All right. So we have item 1 at first, and item 2, then item 3. So I'm just going to save that. Let's go back to our browser to see if we see something here. So if I click on that, and we have here our new section, and we have our accordion right here. And as you see, by default, the first one is expanded. All right. So if I click on the second one, item 2, that one now gets shown. And if I click on item 3, that looks good as well. And if I come back up top and click on item 1, that is showing as well. So this is how we display an accordion. And of course, you can style this with a different background color. You don't necessarily have to keep the same background color here. All right, so next up, we're going to work on alerts. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code right here. All right, and what we're going to do essentially is something similar. We're going to declare another container here. So let's make some space and say div. Actually, I have Emmet installed. So what I'll do is I'll just type .component and hit enter, and it's going to automatically generate this div for me. Now, you should have Emmet installed by default in Visual Studio Code. You can install it if you want. You'll have to do some configuration, so just look up documentation online. If you don't have it installed, just type out the div with the class name as you see here. So this one is going to be alert, so we'll just add an H1 for alert. And now, alerts generally are notifications that can be displayed within a box. For example, for instance, you would commonly see this if you're on a website and there's an error message. You normally would see like an alert pop up at the top of the screen or somewhere to the left or right or the bottom of the screen that would alert you that there's a problem with your order, for example, or it may be a success notification. So alerts allow you to quickly put notifications on the page, and oftentimes they're used with events together to notify the user of a particular event being successful or a failure and so on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a couple of alert examples so you guys can see exactly what I mean. So the first one here, we're first going to bring in the alert. And what I'll do is I'll manually bring it in so you guys can see how this works. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top here, and then right after accordion, I'll put a comma, and then I'll bring in the alert component. And it auto-suggested for us the alert component, which is part of the Flowbite-React. And make sure that you guys are bringing it in under the Flowbite-React import and not anywhere else. So let's go back down here. And what I want to do down here again is I want to bring in this alert. So I'm going to bring it in under this heading right here. So let's say alert, and let's close it out like that and just make a new line. There's going to be some styling we're going to put on this alert. All right, so the styling, actually there's some built-in styling. We don't necessarily have to use Tailwind here unless we want to. Some of these components, and you can look at the Flowbite documentation and the Flowbite React documentation, there are some default components or rather attributes that we can use on some of these components to style it or to set events or event handlers and so on. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the out-of-the-box color attribute for this alert. Now, there are different types of colors. We can specify white, black, purple. A list of values are available in the documentation, but we also have groupings based on notification type. So we have info, for example, and info is sort of like the info messages that you see on websites that just kind of gives you generic information. It's not necessarily a failure or a warning or some sort of success message. It's just like a basic notification. It's oftentimes colored blue. Sometimes it can be colored like gray or white or black, depending on the overall theme of the website. But in this case, by default, when we say color equals info, it's going to give us a blue background with some slightly blue text. So I'm going to set that attribute. And what I'm going to do also while I'm at it is these alerts also take in an event handler named onThisMiss. And this onThisMiss handler is essentially an event handler that allows us to do something when the box is closed. So when the alert is being closed by the user, something can happen. Whatever kind of behavior we want to be invoked, that will happen when we run a function within this onThisMiss call. So all I'm going to do for this example here is I'm just going to create an anonymous function here, and by using the opening and closing parentheses and an arrow, and I'm just going to do an alert. And the alert here, I'll say, let's just say alert dismissed, like that. Okay. Now, obviously, within this alert, we need to actually have some text. So I'm going to use a span tag like that. And let's see, for the text here, let's say this is an info alert, because essentially I'm going to show you guys all the different types of alerts. Let's give it some class attributes as well. So let's say class name, and on this we're just going to say font medium, because we want to enforce kind of like a regular font boldness on this. All right. I think that should be it for our first alert. So if I flip back here to our browser, now you guys can see we have an alert on the screen. So we have this alert section here with this heading, and we have here, this is an info alert. Now on here on the right side, there's an X. If you guys can see it, there's an X icon. If I click on that icon, you guys can see that it outputs alert dismiss, because that's part of our onThisMiss event handler. So you can essentially do anything with that event handler. A common real-world example, for instance, is that you might want to write a record to the database, or you might want to log something to the console whenever the user closes this alert. All right, so depending on what you're trying to do in your application, you can actually fire off a different set of behaviors that would be handled based on this event getting triggered. So yep, that's working perfectly. All right, so let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do to save some time here is I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to output this again, or paste this in. And what I'm going to do next is let's create a warning alert. Now, it's very simple. We're going to basically create an alert that has a yellow background, which follows the Tailwind's convention of alert types or notification types. So I'm just going to remove this info from color, and I'm just going to type warning here like this. And warnings are not error messages. They're just essentially kind of like, hey, here's a heads up. This may be a problem, or this could be a unique scenario. Whatever you're trying to display to the user, it would get shown in a yellow background, all right? Since that seems to be the universal color of caution. And all right, so this one I'm just gonna say, actually we can leave alert dismissed as our event handler. But in here, instead of saying this is an info alert, I'm gonna say this is a warning alert and save that. If I go back, you guys can see we have this warning alert now, right? It's essentially the same. And if I click on this X for the warning alert, we get the same message, all right? Cool, so that's working as well. So I'm gonna paste this in 2 more times like that. And up here on this one, I guess what we'll do now is we'll show a failure alert. And that's essentially, you know, if an error occurs, you may want to display something in a red background. And guys, by all means, you can further customize these. For instance, you can add, you know, icons, for example, like a warning icon or an error icon, which will be like usually a red X, just to kind of give it a little bit more styling. I'm not going to go that in depth for this video, but you could definitely add that like additional components within this element, maybe before or after the span tag as you wish. So let me just change this one to this is, or you know what, let's switch it up a little bit. We'll say for the text here, an error occurred, just like that, okay? And then for this one down here, we're gonna use success. We're just gonna create a success alert, which is generally with a green background. And for this, we're gonna say here, let's just edit this text to say success. All right, so now if I flip back, we have all of our alerts. It looks like something is incorrect. Actually, no, it is correct. It's a very faint red. Let me just double check. Yep, failure. Cool. All right, so if I go back here, you guys can see it's a very faint red, you know, this warning alert, and then we have a very faint green as success. And again, you can override these styles. I think the best way to do that is just to take the color out and then use a background color. Let's try that. Just gonna create one more alert below, paste that in. And let's say, for example, I want to get rid of this color attribute. I'm going to use a class name instead. And I'm just going to say BG dash, let's say black. And then I'm going to use text white on here. Let's see if that works. Let's go back here. And as you guys can see, we have, this is working. So I basically overrode the default by getting rid of the color attribute and adding my own Tailwind class name on this. And there's multiple ways you can do this. This is just probably the quickest way, maybe the dirtiest way. I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely a quick way of doing it. All right. So you guys can see that we have multiple alerts. Let me just, for the sake of this, I'm just going to say this is a, you know, standard alert, for example, just to kind of give it some, yep, it's looking good. All right, so that's pretty much alerts, guys. It's that simple. So again, you can use these in your application just to make things a lot nicer, especially in the case of you have like a weird scenario, or if you have like a confirmation that you would like to show the user, you can absolutely use an alert for that. All right, let's move on a little bit more quickly here. The next thing I want to show you guys are avatars. So avatars are generally used to show profile photos. So again, I'm going to create another component here like that, component section, if you will, and I'll give this one an H1 of avatar. Now for avatar, what I'm going to do is I want to render 2 avatars. One will be the Codeversity logo in a round avatar, and the other one will be the logo in a square avatar. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a background color behind these avatars so you guys can see the border radius of these avatars, so you can see the difference. Otherwise, you won't be able to easily see the difference on a white background. All right, so let's add a new div. I'm just going to open and close that, and I'm going to add a class name to that, and I'm going to use some Tailwind here. So I'm going to give this flex, and this is generally going to render the components within this div within a flex box, if you will. So we're going to say flex. We're going to give it flex. Let's give it a flex wrap so that these components could wrap around the container if needed. And then we're going to give a gap of 4 to give it some space in between the two avatars. And then we're going to give it a background gray of 600 so you can see clearly what's happening. And let's do a width of fit so it could fit perfectly within the container that is in this components container. And then lastly, we're going to give it some padding around all sides of P2. So essentially this W fit is going to put this gray background within the container and is going to fit as much of it as it can within the the parent container. All right. All right, so let's now put some avatars in here. So I'm gonna import the avatar. Again, I can go up top and do it, or I can do it here because the auto suggest is finding it for us. So as you can see here, it's highlighting avatar, and to the right is showing Flowbite-React. So I'm gonna hit enter on that, and that will auto import. If I scroll back up top here, it will auto import it here on line number 6 for us. All right, let me go back down here. And let's start working with these avatars. So for the first avatar, I'm just going to close out this because it's a self-closing tag. The first avatar I'm going to do is rounded. So I'm going to give it an attribute of rounded here to give it some border radius. I think it's roughly border radius 50% if I'm not mistaken. And now I'm going to set the image attribute. And this is how we're going to bring in the image. Now, if you guys recall up top, we have this logo, which is a URL to the Codeversity logo. So that's exactly the variable I'm going to use down here to bring in this image, because essentially it's asking us for a URL. And that's going to be logo, just like that. So this is going to be our rounded one. I'm just going to copy this and bring it to the next line, paste it, and now I'm going to get rid of rounded on the second one. So this is going to give us the default square logo. All right. So now if I go back to our browser, as you guys can see down here, we have a new section called avatar, and we have a rounded avatar and we have a square avatar. And the best use case scenario is if you're working with a profile. For example, if you want to render the user's profile image, you can use this avatar component from from Flowbite to render the avatar. All right, so let's go back here. So that's pretty much avatar. Let's move on here. All right, so next up, what we want to do is we're going to work with badges. All right, so a badge essentially is sort of like a component that shows a particular piece of text, something that you want to attract the user's attention to. So for example, badges are commonly used to show achievements within a game, for instance, or to show some sort of gamification element, or it can be used for any kind of purpose. It's just a simple, small element that we can use to just add or some accented styling and specifically focusing the user's attention to a particular part of our application. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. You'll know exactly what I mean once I do this, okay? So I'm going to add another div for our component container here. And I'm going to do an H1 here of badge. All right. Now this badge component that we're going to bring in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this again within a flex box. So let's do a div here like that, and let's just add some Tailwind classes here. So first up is going to be flex, and let's give it some flex wrap here. Okay, so flex wrap like that, and then gap of 4, kind of similar to what we did above. Okay. And within this, now we're going to bring in some badges. So the first badge here, we're just going to type out the full name of badge, and it's going to give us auto suggest, and we're going to hit enter. And again, it should be imported at the top as we've seen before. And we're just going to add the closing brackets because this is not a self-closing tag. So make sure you have opening and closing tags here. Now for our first text, let's see, what do we want to do here? I guess for the first text, we'll just call this default, just a default badge, because we're just going to use some of the default styling here. All right, so for the color of this badge, what we're going to do is we're going to use, you know what, instead of calling this default, let's call this, let's call this info. Let's just remove default here. We'll call this like info, so you guys can know exactly what I'm doing, because I'm going to use the color of info again, like we did with the alerts above, just to show you guys that this attribute is not specific to alerts. Next up, I'm going to bring in an icon for this badge. Now, the icon that I'm going to use will come from a package called React Icons, which we've already installed. And I'm going to use the question mark icon. All right, so what I'm going to do here is, let me go back up top, and let's bring in that icon. So I'm going to say import. Let's just open up some curly braces, and let's just say from quotes React dash icons. You see the auto suggest is working, but now we have to say slash, and because we're going to be using the hi icons, so we're going to say slash hi, or just hi semicolon. Now within these curly braces, we're going to bring in the hi question mark circle icon like that. All right, so now we can use this icon within this component. So let me scroll all the way back down to the bottom here, and for our icon here between the curly braces, for the icon attribute, we're just going to bring in the hi question circle icon like that. And you know what? Now that I think about it, info, yeah, probably would be the best name for this. Okay, so now let me save that, and let's see if that works. If I go back to my browser here, you guys will see that we have this badge right here. It's very small, but you guys can see right here we have this blue badge with this icon showing. So this is working perfectly, and this is what a badge is used for. So another common scenario, let's say you have an e-commerce store and you wanted to render a badge over an image. That could be another use case for this, where you can use badges, for instance, when sometimes you shop online and over the image you'll say 70% off this item. You can use a badge for that as well. All right, so let's go back to our Visual Studio here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to create another badge here. So let's see, another badge I can show you. I can use again the failure color. So let's use failure. And for this icon, what I can use is the hi X icon. So let me just get rid of this. Let's get rid of all of this hi question circle, and let's type hi and then a capital X. And here we have the auto suggest again. If I hit enter, it'll auto import that icon for us. And let's just say here error. So if I save and I go back, now you guys can see we have an error badge right next to it right here. And it's actually rendering out this X for us. So this is working. So all right, so now I'm just going to copy these a couple more times here. Let's see. Let's create one for success, for instance. And we'll create one for warning, and then one for just kind of like a random one. All right, and let's edit these a bit. So the next one's going to be success. So go to the third badge and just type success as your color. Am I spelling that correctly? Success, like that. And we're just going to change the text of the badge to success. And let's see, what icon do I want to use here? Now, if you guys are not sure what icon to use, you can go to the React icons documentation. I'll include it in the video description below. Go to that documentation and go to icons, and you'll see a list of the various icons that you guys can use for in your projects. So I'm just going to use the hi check icon here to kind of represent a check mark. If I go back, just ignore the other icons, guys. If I go back here, you see here we have the success icon, the third one here with the check mark. It's great. So just ignore the other two for now. Let's go back here. So now we've rendered out info, success, and failure. Let's work on warning next. And we're going to use an exclamation mark for this one. So we're going to get rid of this and say hi exclamation and hit enter. And we're going to rename this text to warning. Okay, and let's just work on the last one while we're at it. Now for the last one, I just want to show you guys that this color attribute doesn't necessarily need to take in these 4 notification types. It can take in a color. And again, the color types or color available color types can be found in the documentation. I'm going to use indigo for this one. So I'm just going to type indigo here, which is a color available to us in our component. And for this one, I won't use an icon at all for this one. So just to let you know, this icon attribute is optional. You don't have to use it. And for this one, we're just going to say standard. That's it, just standard. So if I go back, you guys can see here we're rendering various badges now. And so this is working perfectly. We have our warning here, which is this triangle with the exclamation mark here. And we also have our standard that has no icon in it and is colored indigo. So this is working perfectly, guys. And this is exactly how you use badges within your application. All right. So let's move on a little bit more quickly here. Now that I've shown you badges, I want to show you guys how to use banners within your application. So again, I'm going to come back here, type in component for a new container, and I'm just going to use an H1 and say banner. Okay. Now for banner, we have a component called banner, obviously. That's part of Flowbite React. I'm going to hit enter to import that and close this out. Now within the banner, we're going to be doing quite a bit of typing here because within this banner, this is generally used if you think of like mobile applications, toast messages, for example, that appear toward the bottom of the screen. Very small area or very small box that contains text. If you want to display short messages based on events occurring, something similar to alert, but these are more commonly used whenever you want to have like a compact message at the very bottom or the very top of your screen. All right, so if you don't want to really use a full alert, you can use a banner instead. You can also use a banner, for instance, if you want to display, store-wide notifications if you're running an e-commerce store. So you can use banner for many different use cases. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a div and close that out. And I'm going to give this div a little bit of styling. So the first style I give it is MX Auto. Actually, you know what? What I'll do is I'll give it a flex first. Let's do this in order. So we'll say flex. And we're going to do with a fit, just a fit within its container. And we're going to say justify between to give it some spaces between the different the different components within the banner. And let's give it a background color of a dark gray. So we'll do BG dash, say 700 on this. And then let's give it some padding all around of 4. So it's going to give it padding top and bottom as well as left and right. And then we're going to give it a text white to color the text white within it since we're using a dark background. And then finally, we're going to give it some border radius of rounded small, just to give it a little bit of border radius on the edges or the corners rather. All right. Quite a bit of utility classes from Tailwind. I love Tailwind because we can quickly work with styling. There's no need to worry about, the specific CSS rules. Now, obviously, a quick aside here, I typed all these Tailwind utility classes in line here. A more practical approach is for you guys to define your own class, like custom class name, and then just add this to your globals.css file. But for brevity, I'm just doing it in line here. You can go back after you complete this course and change that if you want to. All right, so next up, we're going to add another div. So div. And I'm going to give this also some styling here. So for styling for this div, because essentially this is going to be centered, so I'm going to say MX Auto on this one. And let's give it, let's also make it flex and then item center. And you'll see why I'm doing that in a second. Okay. Because essentially what we're going to do is we're going to have some components, text components within this as well, right? So we need to just make sure that this is flexible within the container that it's in. So next up, we're going to add a paragraph tag. And let's just open that up. And I'll give this a class name as well because I want to style this. And for the styling of this, we're going to say, again, flex items center. What do I want to do here? So what I want to do is I want to make this text smaller. So let's say text small. And let's give this a font of normal. All right. And just so that way we can take away any potential bolding that can happen as a result of bringing in this component. And then we're going to do text white here as well. All right. Now we're going to bring in let's bring in a React component. I want to pull this from a different library in itself. So I'm going to come back up here to the top, and we have this import from the React icons library that we brought in earlier. But what we want to do here is, since we're going to be bringing this in from the MD library, we can't really import it on this line here. So instead, what we have to do is import it on the next line. So we're going to do import. Again, we're going to put our curly braces here and say from React icons/MD. This is going to be the MD library, icon library. And we're going to bring in one that is called, let's see, which one do we want to use here? Let's use our MD announcement. MD announcement, so we get the auto suggestion here as well, guys. This is the beautiful thing about installing these packages. Visual Studio Code is smart enough to find the exact one we want to use, and then we just need to hit enter on that, and it'll automatically bring it in for us. So we're going to use this icon. So let's scroll back down to where we were working prior. And the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to render out our icon within this paragraph tag. So we're going to say MD announcement. And I believe what we want to do here, let's close this out. Let's put some styling on this as well. So we're going to do class name. Let's try that again. Class name. Oh, that's weird. Let's just type it out. Class name. You might end up with an error message, so I'll have to check that shortly, guys. So we're going to put some margin right, or MR-4. That's margin right of 4. And again, if you want to know what these levels are symbolized, you have to look at the Tailwind documentation. Okay. All right. So MR-4 for margin right. We're going to put a height, so just H-4 for a little bit of height on this icon, and then we're going to do a width of W-4 to make things proportionate. So that should be it for our icon there. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to add a span tag. And within this span, let's just open this up. We're going to say this is a, let's say this is a notification banner. Notification banner, like that. Let's give this some styling as well. So for the styling, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do for the styling here, you know what? You know what? I'm going to, let's get rid of this style. I'm not going to add any special styling here. I'll determine that in a second. Let's just have this span render like this. It's just to see how that looks. Let me just bring this up on the same line like this. You guys don't have to do that if you don't want to, but feel free to do it if you want. And yeah, I think that's it for that part. Okay, so now the next part of this banner creation is we need to define a collapse button so that the user can close this banner as needed. Okay, so now I'm just thinking about how I can do this. Let's just come down on this line, and right after this div, we're going to say banner dot collapse button, like that. Okay, and we need to close this out because we're going to put some text within this. But what I want to do is I'm going to come back up here, and just to ensure that we have white text, I'm going to add a class name again. of text white. Okay. Now for our button text, we're not really going to have text here. We're going to use an icon, and because icons are sort of represented like text in HTML, that's the reason why we're putting text white on this button here as well, because we want to be able to color the text within it white. So I'm just going to bring in that high X, which we've already imported, so we don't have to re-import it because we actually imported that for our alerts above. We're just going to say a high X like this because we want to have a close button essentially. And I'm just going to close that out like that, and I'm going to bring in the class name. I'm not sure why my autocomplete is not working. That's frustrating. Okay, so for the class name, we're going to say H4 to give it a little bit of height. Okay, so H-4. And we're going to also give it a width of 4, level 4. All right. And I think that's all we need for this. Just looking quickly at the documentation here on the side. I think that's all we need. Now again, guys, if you prefer, if you guys want to like review this after this tutorial, because it's quite a bit, you know, you can either rewind this video and start from the beginning again and until it starts to make sense. You can also refer to the documentation online because it's quite a bit to understand. I'm just trying to run through some of these components so you guys can understand it. But again, in the comment section below, if you want me to build an actual website, if I get enough comments and enough attention on this video to do it and enough likes, most importantly, then I will be more than happy to build an actual website using Flowbite components. All right, so let me just save this, and if I go back to our browser, you guys can see here we have this notification, and you can see that this high X icon is colored white. So this is working perfectly. Now we can also override the color of this button. This is kind of like a blue hue to it. By default, you can definitely do that, but I'm not going to do that right now because I want to work through the other components. So this is like a homework assignment. If you guys can learn how to color this blue close button, that'll be great. That's a great assignment to work on. All right, so that's it for banners. Let's move on a little bit, guys. Let's move on to something that we use commonly in all of our applications, and that's button. All right, so I know you guys have been waiting patiently for this, so I'm going to open up another div and close it like that. I'm going to say class name, and that's going to be, again, component. Okay, and then we're going to have an H1. Come on. All right, and button. All right, so buttons, there's no need for me to explain what they are. You've seen them all over the internet. You've seen them within your own applications. So let's just get to the nitty gritty here. I'm going to create another kind of container div here, and we're going to add a class name, and we're going to make this flex, say flex wrap, just to kind of make sure that the word wrap is enabled within the flex grid, and we're going to give this a gap of 2. All right. So this is going to add a little bit of spacing with this gap of 2, spacing between the elements. So now the first button, we're going to bring in this button component, which comes from Flowbite React. Once I hit enter on this, it's going to auto import this for me, and we're going to close that like that. Let's add the text first. So the first one's going to be a default button because I want to show you some of the default styling here on this button. All right. We're not going to add any styling on this. We're just going to add an on-click event handler. So like this. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, this should look very familiar to you. Now, so basically, this will trigger whenever the user clicks the button. So we're, similarly to above as we did with alerts, we're just going to add an on-click anonymous function here. And we're just going to call the alert function in JavaScript. And what I'm going to alert here is a little bit of text like this, default button, just to let us know which button had been clicked. Okay, so I'm going to copy this down, and I'm going to paste this a couple more times. Let's paste it 3 more times. There we go. So now we should have 4 buttons. Now for the second button, what I want to do is put some styling on this, right? Now, out of the box, I can use, again, the same stylings, or I can use the Tailwind CSS styling. So I'm going to use the out of the box color attribute, and I'm going to make this button color, let's make this green. So we'll use success to make it that dark green, or that medium green rather. And instead of default for this alert, I'm going to change this to success, just so we know what button was clicked. And I'm going to also change this default text to success as well, like that. Okay. And for this one here, what I'll do is I'll make this a failure button, so it'll be colored, you've guessed it, red. So failure, and I'll change this text here to failure button. And lastly, what I'll do is, instead of setting a color styling, you guys probably are wondering, well, how do I make a different kind of button? Because these buttons will be square or rectangular in shape. What I want to do, instead of just kind of coloring this button, I want to create a pill button. And a pill button is just a button that has rounded corners or border radius. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a pill. We won't set a color. You know what? Actually, let's set a color. Let's say color. And I believe we have a purple available to us also. So we'll say purple, and we'll just label this as pill. Okay, so I actually forgot this button above to change this text. So for the third button above, let's change the text to failure. And for this button, let's change the text to pill. And what I'll do here is, for this text here, this on-click text, we'll just say pill button. Nice and simple. Pill button. All right. So if I go back to my browser, you guys will see that we have the different buttons here. All right. So we have the default. We have the green success. Now the default, if you guys notice, is sort of like a bluish color. And then we have the darker green success button. We have the red failure button. And then finally, we have the pill button, which is purple. So if I click on default, let's just check our event handler logic. Then you see that we see here default button. If I click on success, we see success button. If I click on failure, we see failure button. And finally, if I click on pill, we see pill button. All right. So that's working perfectly. And again, you can add additional styling to these buttons if you want to change the padding, the margins. If you want to change, again, the color, you can take out the color attribute, for instance, and use just kind of like a default Tailwind CSS background styling from the utility class. So yep, that's pretty much buttons. It's nice and simple. I love using the button component within Flowbite, because it's a quick way for us to add buttons to the page, and we spend a lot less time writing code. So let's create another component to move on. So I'll say component like that and hit enter. And the next one we'll work on is card with image, because we want to not just display a card, but we want to display an image within a card. Now you may be asking, well, what's a card? For you non-designers out there, if you look at a grid, sometimes you'll see that, like, for instance, it will be like an image with some text, like a heading text, with you know, a description, a text description. So a common example is, if you've ever looked at a blog will have a list of blog articles, and those blog articles will be represented within a box, and each box is essentially a card. So a card is used to accentuate a particular part of our grid or our list or whatever have you. So we're going to show this right now by using a card, and I'll use the Codeversity image to display this image within the card itself. All right, so first up, I'll just create a new line, and I'm going to import the card component here. Now again, make sure this is coming from Flowbite-React. I'll hit enter, and that should bring in our card. And I'll close this out and make a new space here. Now this card is going to take in several attributes. So let me just, what I did here is I just made a new line right after the card word, just before the closing bracket. So let me just do that again so you guys can see it. I'm sorry, I went too quickly there. So I'm putting my cursor here between card and the closing bracket. I'm hitting the enter key twice. all right? Because what I want to do is I want to put my attributes here, but vertically. So the first attribute here is going to be class name. And for class name, I'm just going to do a max width of small. So that way this card only expands a certain width, right? Next, I'm going to bring in an image alt. And this is just essentially the alt text for the image. For accessibility purposes, it's good practice to use alt tags on your images. And so we have this attribute or this prop called image alt or img alt, on which we can set a string or some text. So that way, for people who have issues with vision, they know exactly what they're hovering over if they're using a screen reader. All right. Next up, we have an image src or image source attribute, and this is where we import our image. So that's going to be the logo URL that we have set above. All right. So far so good. Now I'm going to use an H5 or a heading 5 here, and I'm going to close that out. Let me make a new space here. First, I'm going to add my styling to this H5. And for the styling, we're just going to do a text of 2XL. Now, you may be asking, why are you using an H5 and not like an H2? Remember, we are styling. We currently have styles in our globals.css file that represent H1 and H2. So I'm just using this H5 because we don't have this styled anywhere. I could use a paragraph tag as well, but I'm just using an H5 so that way, future developers can know exactly what this represents. Okay, so we have the text-2XL to make it rather large. We'll make the font bold, so we'll do font-bold here. We're going to take away some of the letter spacing here to make it a little bit tighter for us. So we'll use tracking-tight, which will give it very little letter spacing between the letters and characters. We're going to use here a text of gray 900 because we don't want really black text. We want something slightly close to black, but not quite black. Okay, just to give it a little bit of pop of color. And yeah, that should be fine like that. All right. So now next up, I'm going to type here, let's say learn to code with coder versity. Cool. So this is just going to be our heading text. You can type anything in there that you want to type. And we're going to create a paragraph tag on the next line. And this will also have some styling. So let's give this a class name of font-normal to override any default boldness coming from the component. We're going to say text gray. We'll make this slightly lighter than the heading of 700. I can't type. 700. Cool. And yeah, that'll be it for that. So for this text here, let's say something like, we can write anything. Let's say subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then we'll just say at Coderversity. Cheap plug. All right. So if you haven't subscribed yet, guys, this is the perfect time to mention it. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay notified on future videos. All right. So with that said, let's continue. I think that's all I want for this. All right. So if I go back to my browser and if I scroll down, you guys can see that I have a card here. And this card has an image at the top, and then it has the heading, which is bolded here, learn to code with Coderversity, and then we have some text beneath it. So again, a common use case scenario, and I misspelled code, I just realized. Let's go back and fix that because I'm OCD, and there we go. So it is perfect now. Now, if you notice, the text wrapped on the next line. I actually, there's something wrong with my D key on my keyboard. No matter how hard I press, I'm probably going to have to replace my keyboard. But all right, so we have learn to code with Coderversity. All right, perfect now. All right, so guys, if you notice I'm missing any D's in my typing, just know that my D key is really screwed up. I'm not sure what happened, but anyway, notice that the text wrapped around for the heading, which is exactly what we want. And that's because we're applying the proper flex styling to this component. So it knows exactly what to do when it comes to word wrapping. So this is working perfectly. So again, a common use case is a blog. If you have a blog page, you may want to have several of these within a grid. So you can use these card elements within a grid element, for example, which is a Tailwind construct. It's not part of the Flowbite library, unfortunately, but you can use Tailwind to create a grid, and then you can render some of these cards within a grid, maybe 3 or 4 within a single row. So yeah, that's a common use case scenario. So there you go. So anytime you guys want to use this, you can use this on your own websites. All right, let's move on here. So we've covered that. Let's go back to Visual Studio and down here, let's see, what do I want to cover next? Next up, let's cover Carousel, working with Carousel. So again, let's create a new component. And here, we're going to call this one Carousel. Now for the Carousel component, as you guys know, it's essentially a series of images, usually, that you can show within a box, and it would normally have a slider element to it. So you would have like images within a slider, and you can use like certain buttons like left and right buttons or previous and next buttons to cycle through the various images. Let me show you exactly what I mean if you're not 100% sure what I'm talking about. First up, let's create a container-like element here for this carousel. And I'm going to create a class name attribute here because we're going to say, we're going to give it a height, a rather large height or medium size height of 56 because we want the image to display somewhat well. We might have the image a little bit cut off at the top and bottom, but we definitely want the sides to be fully displayed. That's, depending on what the aspect ratio is. So we'll give it a height of 56. And you know what? Let's also, I think let's roll with that first and let's see exactly how this looks because we may need to add a little bit of responsiveness to this to make this work. But let's bring in our carousel component by typing in carousel like this. And you see we get the auto suggest. If I hit enter, it'll automatically import the carousel for us, and I'll close that out and make a new line. Now for this carousel, we can give it an attribute called pause on hover. And what that will do is whenever we hover over the carousel's image, it will automatically pause the carousel so we can have enough time to look at the image or read the associated text in the image and so on. So I'm going to type in here pause, and as you can see, we have the pause on hover. We just need to type that in there like that. We don't need to do anything else with that part. All right, and within the carousel next, we're going to render our image. So again, we're going to have several images. Now, a practical approach to this is that if you had a real world application, you would have, for instance, an array of images or an array of image URLs, and then you would loop through each of these using the map function. So it would be something like this. You would have like curly braces, for example, and let's say, for example, your array was called images. You would have like images.map. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's just say imgs.map. Oh, let's try that again. Images, let me just escape like that, .map. And then you would have like, for example, img, and then an arrow function, and then you would have these braces, and then you would come in here and you would output your image URLs using an image tag like that, or using the Next.js version, whatever you would like to do. But in this case, I don't have an array of images, so I'm just going to output a simple image tag here and close it out like that. And the source of this image tag will be logo. Okay, and I'm just going to copy this 2 more times so we'll have 3 images. Now the images obviously will be exactly the same for all 3 of these. I just wanted to show you guys in a real world scenario what you would do with an array, because generally that would be the best approach. So let me go back here, and if I scroll down, you guys can see I have this slider that automatically cycles every couple of seconds. Now, there are attributes where you can control the timing of the cycling. You just have to look at the Flowbite React documentation and then work with those attributes. Now, if I hover over this image, you guys will notice that the image no longer cycles, it no longer changes or slides out. It basically stays stationary because I'm hovering over this image. So that's exactly what we wanted here. So this is working perfectly. And again, a common use case scenario is you would probably have this as part of like a hero section or a header, essentially. You know, a background image, and then you might have some text all over the images and so on. So that's basically how you work with carousels within Flowbite and Tailwind. All right, so we're getting through this rather quickly now. I'm going to show you guys another very important element here, and this one is commonly used often, and this is going to be the date picker element. So let me go ahead and create down here another component like this, and this is going to be our date picker. So we're going to type in here date picker. Now the date picker element that I'll show you, I'm going to go through this rather quickly and just show you guys how it looks because I don't want to go too deep into date picker because there's many different attributes you can use. But within this container, all I need to do is bring in date picker like this. And we get the auto suggest. If I hit enter and I close this out like this, if I go back to my view right here, you guys will see that here we have a date picker object right down here. So now if I were to click on this, you can see if I scroll down a little bit, we actually get a calendar month is specifically, and we can cycle through this. We can select a particular date and it will automatically select it for us. So if you want to know more about how to format this date picker, just go to the Flowbite documentation, and you know there's lots of documentation on how you can work with date picker and reformatting dates and so on. All right, so now let's go back here to our Visual Studio Code, and now we're going to work with another common element, which is a form essentially. So I'm going to say component and h1, and this is going to be form. Now, there's really no need for me to explain what forms are. You guys should already know it, but if you don't know at very high level, it's a way for users to submit information to the server, right? A way for users to submit information to someone within your organization or someone, whoever's the webmaster, that can submit data or information directly to that person using a form. If you think of it like filling out an application, if you will, right? So in HTML, we have a form tag. So I'm just going to create a form like this. And what we're going to do is a form, we don't really have like a form tag that's part of the Flowbite library. But what we do have is we have labels and we have input fields that we can use out of the box to create a form with. So we still have to use this HTML form tag in any case. So I'm going to give this form a couple of styles here. So we're going to say class name. Let's see, we're going to make this form flex, and we're going to do a max width of medium or MD. And then we're going to say flex column because we want this to display with a flex direction of column, okay? And then we're going to give this a gap of 4, right, to give us some spacing between the various labels and their inputs. All right, so now let's see, what do we want to do next? Next, what I'll do is I will create some divs to represent each and every form input. So we're going to say div class name. All right. Let's give it a margin bottom of 2 and give it a block display type. Now, why am I giving this block? What I want to do is anything that's displayed within this div, I want this all to be kind of like displayed on its own block. I don't want this to be displayed in line, right? I want this label to be displayed on its own, right? So you'll see exactly what I mean in a second, because this, all we're going to have in here is a label. So this label is a component I need to bring in from Flowbite React. I'll hit enter and it'll bring it in for me automatically, and I will close this. Actually, what I will do is, this is self-closing, so let me just take that away and do a forward slash and a greater than sign to close this out. And now what I want to do is HTML4, because what I want to do is I'm going to put IDs on these input fields. So I want the ID to match the HTML4 value. So we're going to say HTML4 email because we're going to use an ID of email on the input field. And you'll see exactly why I'm doing this in a second as well. So we're going to say a value of email. Now this value attribute that's part of the label component from Flowbite is the actual text. Because if we had used a regular label like this, then normally we would have to put it here between the tags. But the way that Flowbite handles labels is it takes in this value string as a string and then outputs this as the label. All right, so we have this div here as a block to enforce that this label be displayed on its own line, if you will. Now that I think about it, let me see here. I might want to put this in a different div as well. I want to put all of this in a div. So let me just, what I'm going to do here is right below my H1, or sorry, rather, right below my form tag, I'm just going to make a new line and I'm going to create a div. And on this div, I'm just going to give this a class name, and this is going to be a custom class name of form-input. Okay, and the reason why I'm doing that is because this class essentially is not going to have any styling. It's just for my own, legibility here. I just wanted us to have something a little bit legible, so that way I know exactly what this belongs to. Because essentially, what this form input div is going to represent is a label and an input field within the label, within the same component. All right, excuse me. So let me go ahead now and copy or cut this entire div that we wrote prior out, and I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to paste it in here. Actually, you know what? In fact, let's first paste it in like this. And what I'm going to do instead, actually, you know what? I'll leave it as this because again, we want to have the block element on this label. I think that's cool like that. All right, so now within this same form input component, what I want to do is just add the text input. So I'm going to say here, opening bracket text input. And again, this is being recommended to us by Flowbite React. So I'll hit enter to import that. And just to show you guys what our inputs look like, if I scroll way back up to the top here, you guys can see we have a long list here of various Flowbite components that we're bringing into the application. So that's exactly why I wanted to have the spacing, so to make it a bit more legible. All right, so we have this text input, and this is going to be our input text field. Let me see. What do I want to put here? I'm going to put the ID, as I mentioned, of email. And let's do a value of, let's do a value of email. Should we do a value of email? Actually, you know what? Let's do a type, right? So let me backtrack a bit. So this text input, let me just put this ID back. I'm not sure why I deleted that. So ID email. This text input, so we don't have an email input in Flowbite React. So what we need to do is we need to use the type attribute, and we need to set that to email the way you would with a normal input field. We need to set that to email, so that way the browser will pick this up as being an email field. So when you have form validation in place, it will expect the @ symbol and like a domain like gmail.com, for example. Because if you don't do that, it will default to be in a text field, and there won't be any in-browser client-side form validation taking place with regard to that. So that's the reason why we need to have the type equals email. I'm going to put a placeholder on this, and I'm kind of thinking as I go along here for this one. let's put a placeholder of name at example.com just to kind of give the user some clues of what they need to put in here. Lastly, I'm going to put a required attribute on this so that the user cannot continue the form submission unless they populate this field. Okay, so I think that should be good for this. Let me just go to the browser and see what that looks like for now. Make sure we have no error messages. And as you guys can see here in the form section, we have this email input. This is looking great. You can see that there's a slightly different background color here, but if I click in here, then you see that we have this input field that we can type in. And I want to show you guys something else, by the way. If I get rid of that text here, I'll show what happened here. If I get rid of that text, if I click on just the label, it'll automatically put my cursor in the input field. Now, why does that happen? Again, if I go back here, the label has an HTML4 attribute, and you just need to make sure that that attribute's value, HTML4, is equal to the ID on the text input. If those two values are equal, in this case being email, the word email, then when the user clicks on the label, it'll automatically focus on the field that the user is, that the user wants to fill out. Now, if they do not match, then when you click on the label, nothing will happen. So just make sure that those values match perfectly. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code that we just wrote, and we're going to create another element here. So let's copy everything starting from the form input element, the opening tag, all the way down to the closing tag, which is just before the closing form tag. I'm just going to create a new space here and paste that in like that. Okay, so ultimately what we want to do, this is going to be kind of like a sign up form, if you will. Essentially what we're going to do is create two more password fields that can go here, that can be added here, so that way it can kind of resemble a sign up form. So what I'll do here is everything else will stay the same as far as the containers are concerned. We're just going to, instead of for the HTML form value, we're going to just use password as our string here. This will also be our ID for the first input field. So we're going to say password and password for the label. And then for the text input, we're going to change the type to password. And the actual ID, let's backtrack here, will be password as well. All right, so this will be the first input field. And now let's see what else we need here. Placeholder text, we can say here, let's just get rid of this email, and we can say enter password like that. Cool. And now let's once again copy this entire output here like that and paste it one more time, because this is going to be our confirm password. So it's going to be rather similar. Instead here, let's see, what do we want to call it here? The first one's password. You know what? Actually, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's not do that. Instead, let's make this more into a login form, just so you guys can see how a checkbox would work here. So I'm going to create a login form out of this with the remember me checkbox. So what I'm going to do is, let me just go ahead and paste it back here, but I'm going to make some edits to this. The first edit, let's see. So we have here our form input. You know what? Let's just so we don't get confused, let's just get rid of the entire thing here. So all we should have so far is just this form input. Okay. So now what I'll do here is I'm going to add a checkbox to this form input. I'll add, you know what? Let's add another div. And for the class name, like that, I'm going to give it flex, item center, and then a gap of 2, like that. Slightly different, but similar. And then next, we're going to bring in our checkbox component, which is again from Flowbite React, and we're going to close it out like this. So in this checkbox component, we're going to have an ID that's going to be equal to remember, right? Because this, again, this is going to be our remember me checkbox. So that's all we need for the checkbox component, because remember, the label goes after the checkbox. So right after this checkbox, we're going to bring in a label component here. And we need to just make this self-closing like this. And for this label component, we're going to have an HTML4 of remember. That's the reason why we gave the ID of remember above, because we want to have this HTML4. I think I'm spelling that correctly. Remember. We already have our HTML. We're going to set our HTML4 to this remember because the ID of the checkbox is the same. So if we click on the label, we want the user to be redirected to the actual checkbox so that it's in focus, essentially. And now that I think about it, for this label, let's see here. So for this label, we need to give it a value. So let's give it a value here of, let's give it a value of remember me. Remember me, like that. Now, one thing I will point out to you guys here, you can give the value, we can give this value attribute and set the label this way. What actually would also work is if you just did a kind of like how you would do a normal label, if you just have a closing tag and put your text here. This would also work if you remove this value attribute. So you know what, let's just go ahead and try that and see if that works. This should also work if I do it this way. So you can do it one of two ways. I think it's preferred if you use the value attribute, but you could do it this way as well. I'm just going to try this as an experiment to see if this works. Cool. So that should take care of the checkbox. So lastly, what we want is a button. So we're going to bring in that button element again, which we've already imported above within our prior example. And I'm going to close it out like that. And I'm going to put a button text of submit. And for this, what we need to do is, in a real world scenario, we would have an onSubmit handler on top of the form tag above. So we would do something like this, just to kind of show you guys what I mean. If I scroll all the way back up top, in a real world scenario on this form element here on line 161, we would normally have like an onSubmit handler, right? And what I'll do is, let me just go ahead and add this onSubmit right now. And what I'll do is I'll just add an anonymous function and I'll just set an alert of form submitted here like this, just to show you guys that this is working. Because what you normally would do is on the button that's located within the form tag, instead of having an on-click event here, you would have a sort of like a type submit attribute on this. So you would say type is equal to submit. And just doing that, when the user clicks this button, it would automatically submit this form. Let's just change let's correct the spelling of submit like that. So when the user clicks this button, as long as the required fields have been populated, it will automatically trigger this onSubmit function above on the form tag. So let's try this right now. Let's go back to our browser. And the first thing I'm going to try, if I scroll down here, we should see our form, and we see it right here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click submit and see what happens. If I click submit, if you guys notice, nothing happened besides this error message showing, because we haven't populated a password yet in this field. So let me just start from scratch here. Let me get rid of this prior text. We'll say email will be test@test.com. Password, let's just put in anything. And we have this remember me right here. So I'll just click check on that. And if I click submit, now you guys will see we have a form submitted alert message that pops up. And the reason why we're seeing that is because we've populated all of the fields of this form. So the form data is now valid, and then it will immediately proceed to trigger the onSubmit event handler. Now, in a real world scenario, you wouldn't just do your form validation like this. You would actually have a second, or maybe even in some cases, a third layer of data validation within your form. The first layer is these error messages that are shown if you just click the submit button without submitting actual data. So if I do that, as you guys can see, we see here the same error message that we need to populate the email address. You would also have another layer within your JavaScript, within your event handler function that would check if the data exists or to check if the data is valid. And then a third layer perhaps on the server side prior to you writing to a database. You would have another layer of validation. That would be the best and most secure way to check if the form data is valid. So yeah, that's pretty much it for forms. It's working as expected. It's that simple. As you can see, we didn't write so much code here to make a form render on the page, and we also have a lot of attributes that we can use to kind of handle the validation and event handling management within the form submission process in itself. So that's pretty much forms. Let's move on here. I think next I'll show you guys Modal. We're coming up toward the end of this course here. The next thing I'll show you guys is modals. So modal pop-ups essentially. So let me just come down here. I'll do another component, hit enter, and then an H1 of modal. What happened here? Let's say modal. Okay. So for modals, if you guys don't know what a modal is, essentially like if you're on a website, an example of a modal is if you go again to an e-commerce site and the very first thing that pops up is a sale, a special sale that they're running. It could pop up in the form of a random box with usually a darkened background, and it's asking you to opt into some sort of mailing list, for example, or it's asking you to sign up for an account. That's an example of a modal pop-up. So what we're going to do today is design our own using Flowbite's library to quickly design a modal pop-up. Now, to design your own modal pop-up is normally a little bit tedious if you were using just vanilla JavaScript and CSS, but Flowbite makes it a lot easier. Let me show you what I mean. In order to trigger this modal, we need to have some sort of button on the page. Now, in a real world scenario, you don't always need to have a button to trigger a modal. You can sometimes use JavaScript events or special notifications that trigger other things within your application, just events, or you can delegate events to trigger a modal as well. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to have a button click event trigger our modal pop-up, so because it's the easiest way to show you how this functionality works without writing a bunch of logic to handle state and to handle events and so on. So first, let's create the button. So we've already imported that, as you guys recall. So I'll go ahead and close that out like this. Now this button, I want this to say open modal. Nice and simple. The D key again. All right. All right, so now we have this button, and we're gonna put on here an on-click event. And for this on-click event, what I'm going to do is, if you guys recall, let me just kind of go back up top here. At the top of our functional component, up here, we've created this open modal state at the beginning of this course. And this is a React state that we're creating to track the state of the modal, whether it's open or closed. And we're using a Boolean value, true if it is open and false, or rather true if we want to open it and false if we want to close it. This useState hook is what determines, is what essentially stores this value. So we're going to be using the set open modal to set the value of false or true to the modal depending on the circumstances. And we're going to use this open modal variable that's a part of our React state to determine if the modal needs to be opened or closed. So let's scroll back down and I'll show you a little bit more in detail. So here, when we started writing our onClick function, we're just going to create an anonymous function with these opening and closing parentheses rather. And in here, let's see, what do we want to do? What I want to do is when the user clicks a button, I want to just set the modal's value. So we're going to use that set open modal function like this. Set open modal. And we're going to set that to true because, again, we want the modal to open when this is set to true. Okay, so that's all we need to do for the button. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our modal component like this. And again, we have the autocomplete. And we're going to close that out and make a new line. Now this modal component takes an attribute called dismissible. Okay, Now this dismissible attribute it basically instructs the application to allow the user to automatically close the modal when they click off of the modal's area. So for instance, imagine that the pop-up appears in the center of the screen. If the user clicks elsewhere outside of that container, then the modal will automatically close. So that's what this is doing. Also, what we can do here is we can set a show attribute. And this show attribute in this case would be mandatory in order for us to determine whether the modal should be open or closed. And if you guys recall, we have this open modal state variable that we can use. When it's set to true, that means that we should show the modal. When it's set to false, that means that we should not show, or we should hide the modal. So that's what's happening right here. All right, so let's see. We also have an onClose handler. So this onClose event handler will trigger something when we close the event, when we close the modal. So obviously when we are closing the modal, we want to set the open modal again to false. So let's create another anonymous function with an arrow, and we're going to say set open modal will be set now to false, or will equal false. And that should do it for that part right there. Okay. So now this modal component within Flowbite actually takes a few sub nodes or sub components. So one of them being the header. So if we want to set the text, one text element we can use is modal.header, like this, modal.header. And for this modal.header, if I just close it out like this, let's just type, modal heading here, just so we know exactly what's what. So modal heading, and again, I'm missing my D. Guys, if this YouTube channel does much better, the very first thing I'm going to do is buy a brand new keyboard or fix my D key. That goes to show you my frustration with the letter D. All right, so let's move on to the next part here. What we can do now, so we have our heading, or our header rather. What we're going to do now is we're going to set our body. So we're going to use modal.body. And we're going to open and close that. Now within our body, we can put whatever div, whatever elements we want to style our body, or to construct to set up the structure for our body, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to create a new div in here, div, and we're going to have a class name on this div. And the class name, what I want to do is I want to have quite a bit of vertical spacing between the elements. So I'm going to say space -y -6. So that's going to give us some vertical spacing on the y-axis. And within this, we're going to have a paragraph tag, and I'm going to bring that on a new line, but I'm going to give this a class name of text base to override any font size that comes as a part of this. And we're going to have a leading relaxed. Now what this is, this leading relaxed, what this does, this is basically the line height of the paragraph. So by setting it as relaxed, it kind of takes away a little bit of the line height, but it still makes it look pretty good at a font size of 16 pixels. Okay, it all depends on your font size. You pretty much have to play around with these values. There's leading relaxed, there's leading, let me see, we have different ones here, different levels. So if I type in leading like this, and I put a dash, you see we have different values that we can use here. And if you can look at some of these notes that's built within this, this panel. So leading light, or rather leading tight, will give us a very tight line height of 1.25. So that's like 125% of the font height, or the font, the font size. If I scroll down a little bit, this relaxed is 1.625. Okay, so almost 162.5%. So by having relaxed, we have a decent amount of font height, or line height. So I'm going to use the relax as I said before, just to kind of give it some spacing so it looks nice and tidy. And then let's set a color. We'll do text gray 500, and that's it for that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some lorem ipsum here just to show you guys what that will look like. So say lorem ipsum, and that's an installed, I think that comes default with Visual Studio Code, but yeah, I just put some lorem ipsum text here just to show you guys what that would look like, and I'm just going to go ahead and save that like that. So I think that should be it. Now what we can also do is we can add a footer to this modal. If you want to display something on the bottom, and a common use case scenario for this is if you wanted to display some buttons or some action buttons or links under the body, you can actually put it in a modal.footer node. So we're going to say modal.footer here. We're going to open and close those tags. And now we're going to add a button. Let's say button, open and close that. So the first button, we're going to have two buttons. We're going to have a confirm button. And let's give some styling to that while we're at it. We'll say confirm class name. Let's see, what do we want to do? You know what? I won't put some special styling on this. Instead, what I'll do, let me take this class name out. I'm going to put an on-click handler here. So I'll just use the default, which is blue. As you guys know, with Flowbite, if you don't specify a styling, the default background color of a button would be kind of like a bluish color. So now I'm just going to put an anonymous function here. And when we click the confirm button, we just want the modal to close. So we're going to now call our set open modal function, which is part of our state above, and we're just going to set that value to false. So again, when we click this confirm button, nothing will happen because we're not going to, create special logic or database calls or API calls for this. So we're just going to close the modal nice and simple. And now we're going to have one more button. So we're going to do again button, and make sure your button is with a capital B, not a lowercase b, because if it's a lowercase b, then it will be the standard HTML element. So it has to be the capital B to be the Flowbite React element. So for this button, let's add a color to this. So we're going to add a color, and we're going to just use a color of gray, which we haven't used yet. All right, that's kind of like out of the box. And then we're going to put another on-click handler here. And what I'm going to do here is, let's try this. I'm going to add some curly braces, like this left and right curly brace, and I'm going to hit enter. Because what I'm going to do is create a function out of this. It's going to call two methods. First, it's going to call the set open modal, and I'm going to set that to false again. So it's essentially doing the same thing like the button above, but I'm going to use a semicolon here. And secondly, I'm going to call the alert function, and here I'm going to say canceled, because essentially that's what this button will do. It's going to cancel out of this. Okay, so I'm going to just say canceled. And for the button text, I'm not sure, did I give? No, I didn't give the button text yet. So for the button text, we're just going to say decline, because the other one says confirm. Okay. In fact, you know what? Instead of cancel, let me go back here and I'm going to say declined. All right, let's change that to decline so that way we know exactly what it is to keep things consistent. All right, so I think that might be good to go, guys. So let's go back to our browser and let's test this out. Okay, so here we see the open modal button here. That's great. So if I click on it, now we see the modal here. And this modal has a heading of modal heading. And we have some lorem ipsum text. And we also have the buttons, the confirm button and the decline button. So first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the confirm button. And when I click this button, all that should happen is that the modal should close. So if I click it, all that happens is the modal closes, so it disappears. Now if I click on this again, next I want to click the decline button, which is just this gray button right here. If I click this, the modal should close and there should be an alert. And as you guys can see, right now the modal is still showing because we're still in the event propagation, but we see this alert message as declined. So once I hit enter or click OK, the modal and the alert closes as well. And lastly, I'm going to open the modal one more time, and in the top right corner we see an X. So if I click this X, I'm expecting the modal to close. So let's click X, and it closes. And now that I think about it, there's one more test I want to run. If I open the modal again, if you recall, we added that dismissible attribute onto the modal node. So if I click anywhere else on the page outside of modal, then it disappears. So this is working perfectly. And guys, that's how you easily add a modal pop-up to your web pages. Again, it's great for you to use for like e-commerce pages or any kind of pages where you need to show, for instance, cookie policies or GDPR information. Anything you want to show, you can display this in a modal, and it was that simple. If we had to code that ourselves, it would be a lot more complicated. It's not the hardest thing to do, but it's definitely more complicated than it needs to be. So using a library like Flowbite, it works wonders. Okay, lastly, there's one more component I want to show you guys, and that's a progress bar. Now, I'm not going to show you the live updating of a progress bar. I'm just going to show you how it looks and how you can set the values to display a certain progress within the bar. So let me just create one more component div here. All right. And in this component div, we're just going to call this progress bar. All right, so now we're going to bring in our progress bar, and that's only going to be the progress component from Flowbite React, and that's going to be a self-closing component like that. Now, what we want to do is we want to set a progress attribute, and here normally you would have like some kind of logic that would look at, for example, the number of tasks that need to be completed. And then you would probably have like some sort of mathematical equation that would determine how much of the process has been completed. And then you would output a value like an integer value here. But for brevity, because this course has already gotten a little bit too long, I'm just going to populate this with 50, representing 50%. Okay. And then under this, I'm just going to put a paragraph tag because I want to have a little bit of text below this. So I'm going to add a class name to this. And in this class name, I'm going to add text center because I want to center the text right below the progress bar, and I'm going to give it a padding top or PT of -2, level 2, to give it just a little bit of padding between the progress bar and the text. Lastly, we're just going to hard code here 50%. Where are you? Where's my percent? There we are. 50% complete. All right. All right. So now if I go back and scroll down, you guys can see I have a progress bar here, and it's about 50% complete. If I were to go back here, and let's say I wanted to change this value to, let's say, 25%, and save and go back, you can see now it's at 25%. So again, if you wanted to update this live, you would have some sort of special mathematical logic that would update this based on the number of tasks that needs to run. So for example, let's say you have a ledger of 10 tasks to run. You would probably have this stored somewhere in a database, or you would have this in some sort of JSON file. And then you would just allocate a certain percentage of complete done to each and every part that's done. For example, if one task takes a lot longer than another task, you might want to allocate, for instance, 35 or 40% to that given task, and the other tasks will be a lot smaller, so they may be like 5% each. And then once every task is complete, you would update that number, and then that number will get passed into this progress attribute. So that way this bar will automatically update without the need of refreshing the page. So it will be 100% reactive based on the mathematical equation that gets calculated. And of course, likewise, this 50% complete, instead of hard coding this, you would then use that same state. You probably would use like a React state for this, and you would just kind of output that value here. So instead of like doing this, you would probably have like these brackets, and you would call this something like percent or percentage, something like that. All right. So that pretty much concludes it, guys. That's pretty much shows what the power of Flowbite React looks like. There are plenty of components for you guys to look into, and let's just go back to the website quickly here. There are plenty of components. There's a keyboard component. Maybe I can find my D key there. But there's like a KBD component. There's a button group component. If I click on that, you can actually group your buttons together to make them look more like tabs. The other thing I wanted to show you, you know what we forgot to do, guys? We forgot to do our header and footer, so we're not quite done yet. Let's go back. We're done with this file. Let's go to our header file. If you guys recall, that's in our components. So if I click on components here on the left, we need to go to our app header because we still have to construct our header and our footer. That's something that I definitely forgot to do. Now in here, likewise, we're going to also use the out-of-the-box components to do this. So we're not quite done yet, so you guys can't get rid of me yet. Now the very first thing I want to do is I want to bring in the use client directive again. So I'm just going to get rid of this, and I'm going to say up top here, use client, like that, between single quotes. Because again, we're using client components. Now I know that as of the most recent versions of Flowbite React, they actually support server-side components, or server components for short. In this tutorial, we've been focusing on client components because for some weird reason, the server components are not working 100% correctly. And I think that they rely on you not setting or presetting specific attributes at the start. In most cases, you're going to be using client components anyway because these components would be dependent upon the state of your application. So that's the reason why this is specific. This tutorial here is specific to client components in Next.js 13 and above. So let's go back here. So I added that use client directive. I'm just going to bring in a few imports. So the first import I'm going to bring in is a link from next/link. And that's going to allow us to output anchor tags that will be links to certain pages. We're essentially just going to have a home link because we're not going to have multiple pages in this application. I just want to show you how that works. And then we're going to import from Flowbite React semicolon. We're going to import the Navbar component right here. Oops, not sure what happened there. Navbar. All right, cool. That's going to give us our navbar that we can sort of put in this header very easily. So the very first thing, I'm going to come down here to our JSX section here. I'm going to add a header tag like that and open this up just so we have a header tag because this navbar component doesn't seem to have a header tag, and I just want to make things semantically understandable. So within this header tag, I'm just going to bring in that navbar here. And I'm going to close that off for now and make some space. Now, this navbar element takes an attribute called rounded. So I'm just going to put rounded here. That's going to give us a little bit of border radius. All right. So now the first thing I want to do is I want to work with the logo. So generally, like if you're on a website, you look at a navbar, there's a logo on the far left. So I'm going to add a logo to the left, and you can do that by using navbar.brand and close that up. So the navbar brand will allow us to set a logo. So now I can use the as attribute here, and we're going to say as a link because we wanted that when the user clicks on the logo, whether it's text or an image, the user will be redirected to the home page. So next I'm going to set an href on this, and the href will be basically the YouTube channel. All right, another shameless plug, guys. So I'm going to point you guys here to the youtube.com/@coderversity. So when we click on this logo, it's going to bring you guys to the YouTube channel. All right, which you're already on technically, but just wanted to plug the channel one more time. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you haven't done so already. All right, next we're going to add a span. Add a span tag. And for this span, we're just going to have the name Coderversity. Nice and simple, Coderversity. But let's give it some styling. So in here, we're going to give it some styling. Let's give this class name text of 2XL, and we're going to give it a font of bold. That's it for the styling of that. So this will kind of be like our logo. Okay, so let's see what that looks like so far. Let me go back, and where were we? We were here. Okay, it looks like we have an error message here. Okay, I'm not sure where that's coming from. Let me refresh it again. Could be that we have forgotten to bring in something. Okay, let's look at the error message. It was pretty long here. That's rather long. Let's go down. Okay, so at the top here it says, okay, internal server error. Link is self-closing tag. Okay. All right, guys, so I figured out what the problem is. So the problem here is that instead of, for this as attribute here on the Navbar brand, instead of passing a string of link, we need to pass the link object that we brought in above. What we've imported, where we have the import link above, we just need to pass in the object like this, link. And that should get rid of the error message. Let's go back. And it's going to auto refresh. And here we have our header above. I'm not sure what happened there. It was outputting, but then it disappeared. So let's continue with what we're doing, and maybe it'll show up soon. I do see that there's an error message. Let's continue with this, and then we can try to debug it later on. All right, so what I want to do next is, so kind of referring to the documentation here on the side, the Flowbite documentation expects us to add a navbar toggle node. So let's add that navbar.toggle with a closing. It's a self-closing tag, and that basically on mobile view adds sort of like a hamburger menu and allows us to open and close the hamburger menu on mobile. So in a responsive screen, or a responsive context. Next here, we're going to have to support that toggle, a navbar.collapse. And we're going to open that up. Now, navbar collapse will be the actual menu, both on desktop and mobile. So if we're on a mobile and the screen size is smaller, it's basically going to make that an expandable hamburger menu that when you click the hamburger is going to automatically open. Okay, so within this collapse, what we want next is a link. But instead of just bringing in a link like this, let's use the navbar link. Navbar or .link. You can use either or, but just to kind of keep things nice and tidy and understandable, we're going to use the link that's provided to us via Flowbite's library. So let's open that up, and we're only just going to have one link here, so we're going to just call that home, and that's going to be this page. So on this navbar link, we also have an href attribute, and we could just do a / to represent the current page, which is the home page. All right. So let's see. I think that should be it. That should be it for this section here. So let's go back. Let's see if we can fix that problem. So let's see. If I refresh again, okay, we're still having the same problem. So let's inspect element and let's see what's going on. My thought is that, so we have app header and app header. Okay. Let me just double check before I look at this. Let's go to our layout.tsx file, because that's the file that would contain the header. So we have the app header here and the app footer. That's what we imported earlier. So that should work. Let's see. I'm not sure why that's not working. Let's troubleshoot. Okay, so we got several outputs here. Let me just clear this out. Now, what you're seeing here is like a mix of errors and warnings. Some of these warnings could be ignored. Let's just refresh, because I want to get a clear console output. So let's scroll to the top. So the first one can be ignored. The expected server error message can be ignored in some cases because sometimes it can relate to a plugin or a browser extension that you have installed. In this case, I'm just going to ignore that for now. Let me just go to the next error message here. Uncaught error. Hydrate. I think that's part of this as well. Okay, warning. validate. All right, folks, so I think I know what the problem is. So just to kind of reiterate what the problem is, at the very top, you notice that the header is not rendering, and we have this error message here saying that the expected server HTML does not match. So what we need to do to fix this is, I've noticed this problem. I just wanted to show you what the fix is for this. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. So just to kind of reopen the app header file, appheader.tsx. If you guys recall, this is what we have here. So I haven't changed anything here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my layout.tsx file. So you can do a Command P to do a shortcut to get there, or you can just look for it in the app in the app folder. So I'm going to open that file. And here in this file, one thing I've noticed as a mistake that I've made is I've added this app header and footer outside of the body. These need to be in the body, but not in the main tag. So let's just cut out, for instance, app header, and let's put this within our body. So it's going to be within the body, but above the main tag. Let's just indent properly there, and we're going to do the same thing for footer. We're going to put that just before the closing body tag, but outside of the main. Okay, and that should fix the problem. So let's go back here and let's refresh. Okay, so I'm just finishing the render here. So it looks like the header is rendering. Now if I click on the home link, there we go. So now we're not seeing that error message anymore. So now if I click on logo, again, we're not seeing the error message. It actually redirected us back to the YouTube channel.
And the specific.
All right, good. So now let's go back to our application. I'm just going to click back to go back to our application. So the header is done. Last thing we want to do is the footer. So now we see this other error message. We can ignore that. That's a warning. So I'm just going to close this for now. All right, so lastly, guys, we just want to add a footer. So now let's go to our footer file, which I can get to by just holding Command and clicking on it here. So this is our footer file, right? So what we want to do, we just want to have a simple footer here, and we're going to kind of design this similarly to the header, but we're just going to bring in a few things here. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to come up top. Let's get rid of this. We're going to add the use client directive here to make this a client component. Next, we're going to bring in the footer component from Flowbite React. So we want to bring in footer. Perfect, like that. All right, so now within these tags, let me just get rid of them. We're just going to immediately add this footer like this. And in here, we're going to have a couple of classes. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to, you know what, let's add a container to it. We can actually add a container like this. This is the built-in container that's part of this, this tag. So we can just say container like this. Instead of using the container that we created with Tailwind, we could just use the container that comes with this particular element. And then we're going to put an attribute of class name on top of that. And now these will be the Tailwind utility classes, and that's going to be just footer, a class name of footer. And if you're not sure where that's coming from, if I open up the globals.css file here, and I do a search for footer, there's our styling right here. So we have this footer styling, which is applying a background blue color, and then we have the styling on the particular elements within the footer as well. So let's open up our app footer again. Let's go back to that. So in this element, what we want to do is just output a couple of things. We want to output a copyright notice within it, and we also want to output maybe a link or two. So let's do that. Let's say footer, and we actually have a copyright node. So footer.copyright, and let's see here. This is a self-closing tag. What we want to do, let's just do an href. We'll just do an href of /. That will be the current page. then we also have an attribute called by, and this by attribute will allow us to specify the name of the company. So we're going to say by, and we're going to call this, let's say Codiversity, just by Codiversity. All right. So what else do we want to do here? Let's do a year. We have a year attribute here. So this is all set up for us, guys, through this component. Now for this year attribute, we can do one of two things. We can hard code the current year, or we can use a little bit of JavaScript to do it dynamically. So we want to get the current year in JavaScript. So we just do a new keyword, date object with opening and closing parentheses, and we call the .get full year function and opening and closing parentheses. And that's going to return to us the current year, which as of the time of this video is 2023. All right, so I think that would do it for that part there. Now what we need to do next is we need to set up a group. Now the footer group will have a group of links. So this is going to be a footer link group essentially. So let's type in here footer.link group right here and open it up. And within this footer link group, we're going to have a footer.link node. Footer.link, and I think this is also self-closing as well, so we can do it like that. Now in this footer.link, we can specify an href. I'm just going to set that to equal to a pound sign or a number sign, and the reason why I'm doing that is I don't have any other web pages set up, so I just want it to just appear as a link, but it won't necessarily point to any particular page. All right. Now, actually, now that I think about it, we definitely need to open up these. So let me just add this back. I'm going to call this about, and I'm just going to add the closing tag of footer.link again. Cool. So yeah, guys, just change that back to like an opening and closing tag. So let's copy this a couple more times just to show you what a navbar could look like within the footer. So I'm just going to say one for privacy, one for licensing, for example, and one for contact. So this one here will be privacy, then there will be licensing, and then there would be contact. All right, and I'll save that, and if I flip back to my web browser, if I scroll to the bottom, you guys will see that we have a footer down here, the same color as the header. And this footer on the very left has a Codiversity copyright notice here, and then on the very right we have a list of links. So yeah, guys, this is all done. So now we have a footer, we have a header, and we've gone through quite a bit of components that's a part of the Flowbite and Flowbite React libraries. Guys, make sure you like this video if this was very helpful to you. Go back to the Daisy UI video and compare the power of Daisy UI versus Flowbite. Leave your thoughts in the comments below to let me know what you think about this library. Which one would you work with? Make sure you leave those answers below. And as always, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so. I'm definitely coming back with some more videos that you're going to absolutely love. And with that said, happy coding, guys.